5 children and it. Beautiful as the day. The house was 3 miles from the station, but before the dusty hired fly had rattled along for 5 minutes, the children began to put their heads out of the carriage window and to say, "Aren't we nearly there?" And every time they passed a house, which was not very often, they all said, "Oh, is this it?" But it never was, till they reached the very top of the hill, just past the chalk quarry, and before you come to the gravel pit. And then there was a white house with a green garden and an orchard beyond. And Mother said, "Here we are." "How white the house is," said Robert. "And look at the roses," said Anthea. "And the plums," said Jane. "It is rather decent," Cyril admitted. The baby said, "Wanty go walkie." And the fly stopped with a last rattle and jolt. Everyone got its legs kicked or its feet trodden on in the scramble to get out of the carriage that very minute. But no one seemed to mind. Mother, curiously enough, was in no hurry to get out. And even when she had come down slowly and by the step, and with no jump at all, she seemed to wish to see the boxes carried in, and even to pay the driver, instead of joining in that first glorious rush round the garden and the orchard, and the thorny, thistly, briery, brambly wilderness beyond the broken gate, and the dry fountain at the side of the house. But the children were wiser, for once. It was not really a pretty house at all. It was quite ordinary, and Mother thought it was rather inconvenient, and was quite annoyed at there being no shelves to speak of, and hardly a cupboard in the place. Father used to say that the ironwork on the roof and coping was like an architect's nightmare, but the house was deep in the country, with no other house in sight, and the children had been in London for 2 years, without so much as once going to the seaside, even for a day by an excursion train. And so the White House seemed to them a sort of fairy palace set down in an earthly paradise. For London is like prison for children, especially if their relations are not rich. Of course, there are the shops and the theaters, and Maskelyne and cooks and things. But if your people are rather poor, you don't get taken to the theaters, and you can't buy things out of the shops. And London has none of those nice things that children may play with without hurting the things or themselves, such as trees and sand and woods and waters. And nearly everything in London is the wrong sort of shape, all straight lines and flat streets, instead of being all sorts of odd shapes, like things are in the country. Trees are all different, as you know, and I am sure some tiresome person must have told you that there are no 2 blades of grass exactly alike. But in streets where the blades of grass don't grow, everything is like everything else. This is why so many children who live in towns are so extremely naughty. They do not know what is the matter with them, and no more do their fathers and mothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, tutors, governesses, and nurses. But I know, and so do you now. Children in the country are naughty sometimes too, but that is for quite different reasons. The children had explored the gardens and the outhouses thoroughly before they were caught and cleaned for tea, and they saw quite well that they were certain to be happy at the White House. They thought so from the first moment, when they found the back of the house covered with jasmine and in white flower and smelling like a bottle of the most expensive scent that is ever given for a birthday present. And when they had seen the lawn, all green and smooth, and quite different from the brown grass in the gardens at Camden Town, and when they had found the stable with a loft over it, and some old hay still left, they were almost certain. And when Robert had found the broken swing and tumbled out of it, and got a lump on his head the size of an egg, and Cyril had nipped his finger in the door of a hutch that seemed made to keep rabbits in, if you ever had any, they had no longer any doubts whatever. The best part of it all was that there were no rules about not going to places and not doing things. In London, almost everything is labeled "you mustn't touch," and though the label is invisible, it's just as bad because you know it's there, or if you don't, you jolly soon get told. The White House was on the edge of a hill with a wood behind it, and the chalk quarry on one side and the gravel pit on the other. Down at the bottom of the hill was a level plain with queer-shaped white buildings where people burnt lime, and a big red brewery and other houses. And when the big chimneys were smoking and the sun was setting, the valley looked as if it was filled with golden mist, and the lime kilns and oast houses glimmered and glittered till they were like an enchanted city out of the Arabian Nights. Now that I have begun to tell you about the place, I feel that I could go on and make this into a most interesting story about all the ordinary things that the children did, just the kind of things you do yourself, you know, and you would believe every word of it. And when I told about the children's being tiresome, as you are sometimes, your aunts would perhaps write in the margin of the story with a pencil, "How true," or "How like life," and you would see it and very likely be annoyed. So I will only tell you the really astonishing things that happened, and you may leave the book about quite safely, for no aunts and uncles either are likely to write "How true." On the edge of the story, grown-up people find it very difficult to believe really wonderful things unless they have what they call proof. But children will believe almost anything, and grown-ups know this. That is why they tell you that the earth is round like an orange, when you can see perfectly well that it is flat and lumpy, and why they say that the earth goes round the sun, when you can see for yourself any day that the sun gets up in the morning and goes to bed at night like a good sun as it is, and the earth knows its place and lies as still as a mouse. Yet I dare say you believe all that about the earth and the sun, and if so, you will find it quite easy to believe that before Anthea and Cyril and the others had been a week in the country, they had found a fairy. At least they called it that, because that was what it called itself, and of course it knew best. But it was not at all like any fairy you ever saw or heard of or read about. It was at the gravel pits. Father had to go away suddenly on business, and Mother had gone away to stay with Granny, who was not very well. They both went in a great hurry, and when they were gone, the house seemed dreadfully quiet and empty, and the children wandered from one room to another and looked at the bits of paper and string on the floors left over from the packing, and not yet cleared up, and wished they had something to do. It was Cyril who said, "I say, let's take our Margate spades and go and dig in the gravel pits. We can pretend it's seaside." "Father said it was once," Anthea said. "He says there are shells they're thousands of years old." So they went. Of course, they had been to the edge of the gravel pit and looked over, but they had not gone down into it, for fear Father should say they mustn't play there. And the same with the chalk quarry. The gravel pit is not really dangerous if you don't try to climb down the edges, but go the slow, safe way round by the road, as if you were a cart. Each of the children carried its own spade, and took it in turns to carry the lamb. He was the baby, and they called him that because "Ba" was the first thing he ever said. They called Anthea Panther, which seems silly when you read it, but when you say it, it sounds a little like her name. The gravel pit is very large and wide, with grass growing round the edges at the top, and dry stringy wildflowers, purple and yellow. It is like a giant's wash-hand basin, and there are mounds of gravel, and holes in the sides of the basin where gravel has been taken out, and high up in the steep sides there are the little holes that are the little front doors of the little San Martin's little houses. The children built a castle, of course, but castle building is rather poor fun when you have no hope of the swishing tide ever coming in to fill up the moat and wash away the drawbridge. And at the happy last, to wet everybody up to the waist at least, Cyril wanted to dig out a cave to play smugglers in, but the others thought it might bury them alive. So it ended in all spades going to work to dig a hole through the castle to Australia. These children, you see, believed that the world was round, and that on the other side, the little Australian boys and girls were really walking wrong way up, like flies on the ceiling, with their heads hanging down into the air. The children dug, and they dug, and they dug, and their hands got sandy and hot and red, and their faces got damp and shiny. The lamb had tried to eat the sand, and had cried so hard when he found that it was not, as he had supposed, brown sugar, that he was now tired out, and was lying asleep in a warm, fat bunch in the middle of the half-finished castle. He's left his brothers and sisters free to work really hard, and the hole that was to come out in Australia soon grew so deep that Jane, who was called Pussy for short, begged the others to stop. "Suppose the bottom of the hole gave way suddenly," she said, "and you tumbled out among the little Australians. All the sand would get in their eyes." "Yes," said Robert, "and they would hate us and throw stones at us, and not let us see the kangaroos or opossums or blue gums or emu brand birds or anything." Cyril and Anthea knew that Australia was not quite so near as all that, but they agreed to stop using the spades and go on with their hands. This was quite easy, because the sand at the bottom of the hole was very soft and fine and dry, like sea sand, and there were little shells in it. "Fancy it having been wet sea here once, all sloppy and shiny," said Jane, "with fishes and kangaroos and coral and mermaids, and masts of ships and wrecked Spanish treasure. I wish we could find a gold doubloon or something," Cyril said. "How did the sea get carried away?" Robert asked. "Not in a pail, silly," said his brother. "Father says the earth got too hot underneath. like you do in bed sometimes. So it just hunched up its shoulders, and the sea had to slip off, like the blankets do off us, and the shoulder was left sticking out and turned into dry land. Let's go and look for shells. I think that little cave looks likely, and I see something sticking out there like a bit of wrecked ship's anchor, and it's beastly hot in the Australian hole. The others agreed, but Anthea went on digging. She always liked to finish a thing when she had once begun it. She felt it would be a disgrace to leave that hole without getting through to Australia. The cave was disappointing because there were no shells, and the wrecked ship's anchor turned out to be only the broken end of a pickaxe handle. And the cave party were just making up their minds that the sand makes you thirstier when it is not by the seaside, and someone had suggested going home for lemonade when Anthea suddenly screamed, "Cyril, come here. Oh, come quick. It's alive. It'll get away, quick." They all hurried back. "It's a rat, I shouldn't wonder," said Robert. "Father says they infest old places, and this must be pretty old if the sea was here thousands of years ago." "Perhaps it is a snake," said Jane, shuddering. "Let's look," said Cyril, jumping into the hole. "I'm not afraid of snakes. I like them. If it is a snake, I'll tame it, and it will follow me everywhere, and I'll let it sleep round my neck at night." "No, you won't," said Robert firmly. He shared Cyril's bedroom. "But you may if it's a rat." "Oh, don't be silly," said Anthea. "It's not a rat, it's much bigger. And it's not a snake. It's got feet, I saw them, and fur. No, not the spade. You'll hurt it, dig with your hands. And let it hurt me instead. That's so likely, isn't it?" said Cyril, seizing a spade. "Oh, don't," said Anthea. "Squirrel, don't I? It sounds silly, but it said something. It really and truly did." "What?" "It said, 'You let me alone.'" But Cyril merely observed that his sister must have gone off her nut, and he and Robert dug with spades while Anthea sat on the edge of the hole, jumping up and down with hotness and anxiety. They dug carefully, and presently everyone could see that there really was something moving in the bottom of the Australian hole. Then Anthea cried out, "I'm not afraid. Let me dig," and fell on her knees and began to scratch like a dog does when he has suddenly remembered where it was that he buried his bone. "Oh, I felt fur," she cried, half laughing and half crying. "I did indeed, I did," when suddenly a dry, husky voice in the sand made them all jump back, and their hearts jumped nearly as fast as they did. "Let me alone," it said. And now everyone heard the voice and looked at the others to see if they had too. "But we want to see you," said Robert bravely. "I wish you'd come out," said Anthea, also taking courage. "Oh, well, if that's your wish," the voice said, and the sand stirred and spun and scattered, and something brown and furry and fat came rolling out into the hole, and the sand fell off it, and it sat there yawning and rubbing the ends of its eyes with its hands. "I believe I must have dropped asleep," it said, stretching itself. The children stood round the hole in a ring, looking at the creature they had found. It was worth looking at. Its eyes were on long horns like a snail's eyes, and it could move them in and out like telescopes. It had ears like a bat's ears, and its tubby body was shaped like a spider's, and covered with thick, soft fur. Its legs and arms were furry too, and it had hands and feet like a monkey's. "What on earth is it?" Jane said, "Shall we take it home?" The thing turned its long eyes to look at her and said, "Does she always talk nonsense, or is it only the rubbish on her head that makes her silly?" It looked scornfully at Jane's hat as it spoke. "She doesn't mean to be silly," Anthea said gently. "We none of us do, whatever you may think. Don't be frightened. We don't want to hurt you, you know." "Hurt me," it said. "Me frightened. Upon my word. Why, you talk as if I were nobody in particular. All its fur stood out like a cat's when it is going to fight." "Well," said Anthea, still kindly, "perhaps if we knew who you are in particular, we could think of something to say that wouldn't make you cross. Everything we've said so far seems to have. Who are you? And don't get angry. Because really we don't know." "You don't know," it said. "Well, I knew the world had changed, but well, really, do you mean to tell me seriously you don't know a Samid when you see one? A Samiad, that's Greek to me." "So it is to everyone," said the creature sharply. "Well, in plain English, then, a sand fairy. Don't you know a sand fairy when you see one?" It looked so grieved and hurt that Jane hastened to say, "Of course I see you are now. It's quite plain now one comes to look at you. You came to look at me several sentences ago," it said crossly, beginning to curl up again in the sand. "Oh, don't go away again. Do talk some more," Robert cried. "I didn't know you were a sand fairy, but I knew directly I saw you that you were much the wonderfulest thing I'd ever seen." The sand fairy seemed a shade less disagreeable after this. "It isn't talking I mind," it said, "as long as you're reasonably civil. But I'm not going to make polite conversation for you. If you talk nicely to me, perhaps I'll answer you, and perhaps I won't. Now say something." Of course no one could think of anything to say, but at last Robert thought of "How long have you lived here?" And he said it at once. "Oh, ages, several thousand years," replied the Samid. "Tell us all about it. Do, it's all in books." "You aren't," Jane said. "Oh, tell us everything you can about yourself. We don't know anything about you, and you are so nice." The sand fairy smoothed his long rat-like whiskers and smiled between them. "Do please tell," said the children all together. "It is wonderful how quickly you get used to things, even the most astonishing." 5 minutes before, the children had had no more idea than you that there was such a thing as a sand fairy in the world, and now they were talking to it as though they had known it all their lives. It drew its eyes in and said, "How very sunny it is, quite like old times. Where do you get your megatheriums from now?" "What?" said the children all at once. It is very difficult always to remember that what is not polite, especially in moments of surprise or agitation. Are pterodactyls plentiful now? The sand fairy went on. The children were unable to reply. What do you have for breakfast? The fairy said impatiently. And who gives it you? Eggs and bacon and bread and milk and porridge and things. Mother gives it us. What are megawatts its names, and terawatt do you call them? And does anyone have them for breakfast? Why, almost everyone had pterodactyl for breakfast in my time. Pterodactyls were something like crocodiles, and something like birds. I believe they were very good grilled. You see, it was like this. Of course, there were heaps of sand fairies then, and in the morning, early, you went out and hunted for them. And when you'd found one, it gave you your wish. People used to send their little boys down to the seashore early in the morning before breakfast to get the day's wishes. And very often the eldest boy in the family would be told to wish for a megatherium, ready jointed for cooking. It was as big as an elephant, you see, so there was a good deal of meat on it. And if they wanted fish, the ichthyosaurus was asked for. He was 20 to 40 feet long, so there was plenty of him. And for poultry, there was the plesiosaurus. There were nice pickings on that too. Then the other children could wish for other things. But when people had dinner parties, it was nearly always megatheriums and ichthyosaurus, because his fins were a great delicacy, and his tail made soup. There must have been heaps and heaps of cold meat left over, said Anthea, who meant to be a good housekeeper some day. Oh no, said the Samite, that would never have done. Why, of course, at sunset what was left over turned into stone. You find the stone bones of the megatherium, and things all over the place even now, they tell me. Who tell you? Asked Cyril, but the sand fairy frowned and began to dig very fast with its furry hands. Oh, don't go. They all cried. Tell us more about it when it was megatheriums for breakfast. Was the world like this then? It stopped digging. Not a bit, it said. It was nearly all sand where I lived, and coal grew on trees, and the periwinkles were as big as tea trays. You find them now. They're turned into stone. We sand fairies used to live on the seashore, and the children used to come with their little flint spades and flint pails and make castles for us to live in. That's thousands of years ago, but I hear that children still build castles on the sand. It's difficult to break yourself of a habit. But why did you stop living in the castles? Asked Robert. It's a sad story, said the Samite gloomily. It was because they would build moats to the castles, and the nasty, wet, bubbling sea used to come in. And of course, as soon as a sand fairy got wet, it caught cold, and generally died. And so there got to be fewer and fewer, and whenever you found a fairy and had a wish, you used to wish for a megatherium, and eat twice as much as you wanted, because it might be weeks before you got another wish. And did you get wet? Robert inquired. The sand fairy shuddered. Only once, it said. The end of the 12th hair of my top left whisker. I feel the place still in damp weather. It was only once, but it was quite enough for me. I went away as soon as the sun had dried my poor dear whisker. I scurried away to the back of the beach and dug myself a house deep in warm, dry sand, and there I've been ever since. And the sea changed its lodgings afterwards. And now I'm not going to tell you another thing. Just one more, please, said the children. Can you give wishes now? Of course, said it. Didn't I give you yours a few minutes ago? You said, I wish you'd come out, and I did. Oh, please, mayn't we have another? Yes, but be quick about it. I'm tired of you. I dare say you have often thought what you would do if you had 3 wishes given you, and have despised the old man and his wife in the black pudding story, and felt certain that if you had the chance you could think of 3 really useful wishes without a moment's hesitation. These children had often talked this matter over, but now the chance had suddenly come to them. They could not make up their minds. Quick, said the sand fairy crossly. No one could think of anything. Only Anthea did manage to remember a private wish of her own, and Jane's, which they had never told the boys. She knew the boys would not care about it, but still, it was better than nothing. "I wish we were all as beautiful as the day," she said, in a great hurry. The children looked at each other, but each could see that the others were not any better looking than usual. The Samite pushed out its long eyes and seemed to be holding its breath and swelling itself out till it was twice as fat and furry as before. Suddenly, it let its breath go in a long sigh. "I'm really afraid I can't manage it," it said apologetically. "I must be out of practice." The children were horribly disappointed. "Oh, do try again," they said. "Well," said the Sand Fairy, "the fact is, I was keeping back a little strength to give the rest of you your wishes with. If you'll be contented with one wish a day amongst the lot of you, I dare say, I can screw myself up to it. Do you agree to that?" "Yes, oh yes," said Jane and Anthea. The boys nodded. They did not believe the Sand Fairy could do it. You can always make girls believe things much easier than you can boys. It stretched out its eyes farther than ever, and swelled and swelled and swelled. "I do hope it won't hurt itself," said Anthea. "Or crack its skin," Robert said anxiously. Everyone was very much relieved when the Sand Fairy, after getting so big that it almost filled up the hole in the sand, suddenly let out its breath and went back to its proper size. "That's all right," it said, panting heavily. "It'll come easier tomorrow." "Did it hurt much?" asked Anthea. "Only my poor whisker, thank you," said he. "But you're a kind and thoughtful child. Good day." It scratched suddenly and fiercely with its hands and feet, and disappeared in the sand. Then the children looked at each other, and each child suddenly found itself alone with 3 perfect strangers, all radiantly beautiful. They stood for some moments in perfect silence. Each thought that its brothers and sisters had wandered off, and that these strange children had stolen up unnoticed while it was watching the swelling form of the Sand Fairy. Anthea spoke first. "Excuse me," she said very politely to Jane, who now had enormous blue eyes and a cloud of russet hair. "But have you seen 2 little boys and a little girl anywhere about?" "I was just going to ask you that," said Jane. And then Cyril cried, "Why, it's you. Know the hole in your pinafore. You are Jane, aren't you? And you're the panther. I can see your dirty handkerchief that you forgot to change after you'd cut your thumb. Crikey, the wish has come off after all. I say, am I as handsome as you are? If you're Cyril, I liked you much better as you were before," said Anthea decidedly. "You look like the picture of the young chorister. With your golden hair, you'll die young. I shouldn't wonder. And if that's Robert, he's like an Italian organ grinder. His hair's all black. You 2 girls are like Christmas cards. Then, that's all silly Christmas cards," said Robert angrily. "And Jane's hair is simply carrots." It was indeed of that Venetian tint so much admired by artists. "Well, it's no use finding fault with each other," said Anthea. "Let's get the lamb and lug it home to dinner. The servants will admire us most awfully, you'll see." Baby was just waking when they got to him, and not one of the children, but was relieved to find that he at least was not as beautiful as the day, but just the same as usual. I suppose he's too young to have wishes naturally, said Jane. We shall have to mention him, especially next time. Anthea ran forward and held out her arms. Come to own Panther, Ducky, she said. The baby looked at her disapprovingly and put a sandy pink thumb in his mouth. Anthea was his favorite sister. Come then, she said. Jiwei Long, said the baby. Come to own Pussy, said Jane. Wants my panty, said the lamb dismally, and his lip trembled. Here, come on, veteran, said Robert. Come and have a yiddy on Yobby's back. Ya, narky narky boy, howled the baby, giving way altogether. Then the children knew the worst. The baby did not know them. They looked at each other in despair, and it was terrible to each, in this dire emergency, to meet only the beautiful eyes of perfect strangers, instead of the merry, friendly, commonplace, twinkling, jolly little eyes of its own brothers and sisters. This is most truly awful, said Cyril, when he had tried to lift up the lamb, and the lamb had scratched like a cat and bellowed like a bull. We've got to make friends with him. I can't carry him home screaming like that. Fancy having to make friends with our own baby. It's too silly. That, however, was exactly what they had to do. It took over an hour, and the task was not rendered any easier by the fact that the lamb was by this time as hungry as a lion and as thirsty as a desert. At last, he consented to allow these strangers to carry him home by turns, but as he refused to hold on to such new acquaintances, he was a dead weight and most exhausting. Thank goodness we're home, said Jane, staggering through the iron gate to where Martha, the nursemaid, stood at the front door, shading her eyes with her hand and looking out anxiously. Here, do take baby. Martha snatched the baby from her arms. Thanks be, he's safe back, she said. Where are the others? And whoever to goodness gracious are all of you? We're U.S., of course, said Robert. And who's U.S. when you're at home? Asked Martha scornfully. I tell you it's U.S. Only we're beautiful as the day, said Cyril. I'm Cyril, and these are the others, and we're jolly hungry. Let us in, and don't be a silly idiot. Martha merely dreaded Cyril's impudence and tried to shut the door in his face. I know we look different, but I'm Anthea, and we're so tired, and it's long past dinner time. Then go home to your dinners, whoever you are, and if our children put you up to this play acting, you can tell them from me they'll catch it, so they know what to expect. With that, she did bang the door. Cyril rang the bell violently. No answer. Presently Cook put her head out of a bedroom window and said, If you don't take yourselves off, and that precious sharp, I'll go and fetch the police. And she slammed down the window. It's no good, said Anthea. Oh, do come away before we get sent to prison. The boys said it was nonsense, and the law of England couldn't put you in prison for just being as beautiful as the day. But all the same they followed the others out into the lane. We shall be our proper selves after sunset, I suppose, said Jane. I don't know, Cyril said sadly. It mayn't be like that now things have changed a good deal since Megatherium times. Oh, cried Anthea suddenly, perhaps we shall turn into stone at sunset, like the Megatheriums did, so that there mayn't be any of us left over for the next day. She began to cry, so did Jane. even the boys turned pale. No one had the heart to say anything. It was a horrible afternoon. There was no house near where the children could beg a crust of bread or even a glass of water. They were afraid to go to the village because they had seen Martha go down there with a basket, and there was a local constable. True, they were all as beautiful as the day, but that is a poor comfort when you are as hungry as a hunter and as thirsty as a sponge. 3 times they tried in vain to get the servants in the White House to let them in and listen to their tale. And then Robert went alone, hoping to be able to climb in at one of the back windows and so open the door to the others. But all the windows were out of reach, and Martha emptied a toilet jug of cold water over him from a top window and said, "Go along with you, you nasty little Italian monkey." It came at last to their sitting down in a row under the hedge, with their feet in a dry ditch, waiting for sunset, and wondering whether, when the sun did set, they would turn into stone, or only into their own old natural selves. And each of them still felt lonely and among strangers, and tried not to look at the others, for though their voices were their own, their faces were so radiantly beautiful as to be quite irritating to look at. "I don't believe we shall turn to stone," said Robert, breaking a long, miserable silence, "because the sand fairy said he'd give us another wish tomorrow, and he couldn't if we were stone, could he?" The others said no, but they weren't at all comforted. Another silence, longer and more miserable, was broken by Cyril's suddenly saying, "I don't want to frighten you girls, but I believe it's beginning with me already. My foot's quite dead. I'm turning to stone, I know I am, and so will you in a minute." "Never mind," said Robert kindly. "Perhaps you'll be the only stone one, and the rest of us will be all right, and we'll cherish your statue and hang garlands on it." But when it turned out that Cyril's foot had only gone to sleep through his sitting too long with it under him, and when it came to life in an agony of pins and needles, the others were quite cross. "Giving us such a fright for nothing," said Anthea. The third and miserablest silence of all was broken by Jane. She said, "If we do come out of this all right, we'll ask the Samyad to make it so that the servants don't notice anything different, no matter what wishes we have." The others only grunted. They were too wretched even to make good resolutions. At last hunger and fright and crossness and tiredness, 4 very nasty things, all joined together to bring one nice thing, and that was sleep. The children lay asleep in a row, with their beautiful eyes shut and their beautiful mouths open. Anthea woke first. The sun had set, and the twilight was coming on. Anthea pinched herself very hard to make sure, and when she found she could still feel pinching, she decided that she was not stone, and then she pinched the others. They also were soft. "Wake up," she said, almost in tears of joy. "It's all right, we're not stone. And oh, Cyril, how nice and ugly you do look, with your old freckles and your brown hair and your little eyes. And so do you all," she added, so that they might not feel jealous. When they got home, they were very much scolded by Martha, who told them about the strange children. A good-looking lot, I must say, but that impudent. "I know," said Robert, who knew by experience how hopeless it would be to try to explain things to Martha. "And where on earth have you been all this time? You naughty little things, you. In the lane. Why didn't you come home hours ago?" "We couldn't because of them," said Anthea. "Who?" "The children who were as beautiful as the day. They kept us there till after sunset. We couldn't come back till they'd gone. You don't know how we hated them. Oh, do give us some supper. We are so hungry." "Hungry? I should think so," said Martha angrily. "Out all day like this. Well, I hope it'll be a lesson to you not to go picking up with strange children down here after measles, as likely as not. Now mind, if you see them again, don't you speak to them. Not one word, nor so much as a look. But come straight away and tell me. I'll spoil their beauty for them. If ever we do see them again, we'll tell you," Anthea said, and Robert, fixing his eyes fondly on the cold beef that was being brought in on a tray by cook, added in heartfelt undertones, "And we'll take jolly good care we never do see them again." And they never have. Golden Guine. Anthea woke in the morning from a very real sort of dream, in which she was walking in the zoological gardens on a pouring wet day, without any umbrella. The animals seemed desperately unhappy because of the rain, and were all growling gloomily. When she awoke, both the growling and the rain went on just the same. The growling was the heavy, regular breathing of her sister Jane, who had a slight cold and was still asleep. The rain fell in slow drops on to Anthea's face from the wet corner of a bath towel, which her brother Robert was gently squeezing the water out of to wake her up, as he now explained. "Oh, drop it," she said rather crossly. So he did, for he was not a brutal brother, though very ingenious in apple pie beds, booby traps, original methods of awakening sleeping relatives, and the other little accomplishments which make home happy. "I had such a funny dream," Anthea began. "So did I," said Jane, wakening suddenly and without warning. "I dreamed we found a sand fairy in the gravel pits, and it said it was a Psammead, and we might have a new wish every day. But that's what I dreamed," said Robert. "I was just going to tell you. And we had the first wish directly it said so. And I dreamed you girls were donkeys enough to ask for us all to be beautiful as the day, and we jolly well were. And it was perfectly beastly. But can different people all dream the same thing?" said Anthea, sitting up in bed, "because I dreamed all that as well as about the zoo and the rain, and baby didn't know us in my dream, and the servants shut us out of the house because the radiantness of our beauty was such a complete disguise, and the voice of the eldest brother sounded from across the landing. 'Come on, Robert,' it said. 'You'll be late for breakfast again, unless you mean to shirk your bath like you did on Tuesday.' 'I say, come here a sec,' Robert replied. 'I didn't shirk it. I had it after brekker in Father's dressing room, because ours was emptied away.' Cyril appeared in the doorway, partially clothed. 'Look here,' said Anthea. 'We've all had such an odd dream. We've all dreamed we found a sand fairy.' Her voice died away before Cyril's contemptuous glance. 'Dream,' he said. 'You little sillies, it's true. I tell you it all happened. That's why I'm so keen on being down early. go up there directly after Brecker and have another wish. Only we'll make up our minds solid before we go, what it is we do want, and no one must ask for anything unless the others agree first. No more peerless beauties for this child, thank you. Not if I know it. The other three dressed, with their mouths open. If all that dream about the sand fairy was real, this real dressing seemed very like a dream, the girls thought. Jane felt that Cyril was right, but Anthea was not sure, till after they had seen Martha and heard her full and plain reminders about their naughty conduct the day before. Then Anthea was sure. Because, said she, servants never dream anything but the things in the dream book, like snakes and oysters, and going to a wedding, that means a funeral, and snakes are a false female friend, and oysters are babies. Talking of babies, said Cyril, where's the lamb? Martha's going to take him to Rochester to see her cousins. Mother said she might. She's dressing him now, said Jane, in his very best coat and hat. Bread and butter, please. She seems to like taking him too, said Robert, in a tone of wonder. Servants do like taking babies to see their relations, Cyril said. I've noticed it before, especially in their best things. I expect they pretend they're their own babies, and that they're not servants at all, but married to noble dukes of high degree. And they say the babies are the little dukes and duchesses. Jane suggested dreamily, taking more marmalade. I expect that's what Martha'll say to her cousin. She'll enjoy herself most frightfully. She won't enjoy herself most frightfully carrying our infant duke to Rochester, said Robert. Not if she's anything like me, she won't. Fancy walking to Rochester with the lamb on your back. Oh, crikey, said Cyril in full agreement. She's going by carrier, said Jane. Let's see them off. Then we shall have done a polite and kindly act, and we shall be quite sure we've got rid of them for the day. So they did. Martha wore her Sunday dress of 2 shades of purple, so tight in the chest that it made her stoop, and her blue hat with the pink cornflowers and white ribbon. She had a yellow lace collar with a green bow, and the lamb had indeed his very best cream-colored silk coat and hat. It was a smart party that the carrier's cart picked up at the crossroads, when its white tilt and red wheels had slowly vanished in a swirl of chalk dust. And now for the Psammead, said Cyril, and off they went. As they went, they decided on the wish they would ask for. Although they were all in a great hurry, they did not try to climb down the sides of the gravel pit, but went round by the safe lower road, as if they had been carts. They had made a ring of stones round the place where the sand fairy had disappeared, so they easily found the spot. The sun was burning and bright, and the sky was deep blue without a cloud. The sand was very hot to touch. Oh, suppose it was only a dream after all, Robert said, as the boys uncovered their spades from the sand heap where they had buried them and began to dig. Suppose you were a sensible chap, said Cyril. One's quite as likely as the other. Suppose you kept a civil tongue in your head, Robert snapped. Suppose we girls take a turn, said Jane, laughing. You boys seem to be getting very warm. Suppose you don't come shoving your silly oar in, said Robert, who was now warm indeed. We won't, said Anthea quickly. be so grumpy we won't say a word. You shall be the one to speak to the fairy and tell him what we've decided to wish for. You'll say it much better than we shall. Suppose you drop being a little humbug, said Robert, but not crossly. Look out, dig with your hands now. So they did, and presently uncovered the spider-shaped brown hairy body, long arms and legs, bat's ears and snails, eyes of the sand fairy himself. Everyone drew a deep breath of satisfaction, for now of course it couldn't have been a dream. The Samite sat up and shook the sand out of its fur. How's your left whisker this morning? Said Anthea politely. Nothing to boast of, said it. It had rather a restless night, but thank you for asking. I say, said Robert, do you feel up to giving wishes today? Because we very much want an extra besides the regular one. The extra's a very little one, he added reassuringly. Humph, said the sand fairy. If you read this story aloud, please pronounce humph exactly as it is spelled, for that is how he said it. Humph. Do you know, until I heard you being disagreeable to each other just over my head, and so loud too, I really quite thought I had dreamed you all. I do have very odd dreams sometimes. Do you? Jane hurried to say, so as to get away from the subject of disagreeableness. I wish, she added politely, you'd tell us about your dreams. They must be awfully interesting. Is that the day's wish? Said the sand fairy, yawning. Cyril muttered something about just like a girl, and the rest stood silent. If they said yes, then goodbye to the other wishes they had decided to ask for. If they said no, it would be very rude, and they had all been taught manners, and had learned a little too, which is not at all the same thing. A sigh of relief broke from all lips when the sand fairy said, If I do, I shan't have strength to give you a second wish, not even good tempers, or common sense, or manners, or little things like that. We don't want you to put yourself out at all about these things. We can manage them quite well ourselves, said Cyril eagerly, while the others looked guiltily at each other, and wished the fairy would not keep all on about good tempers, but give them one good rowing if it wanted to, and then have done with it. Well, said the Samite, putting out his long snail's eyes so suddenly that one of them nearly went into the round boy's eyes of Robert. Let's have the little wish first. We don't want the servants to notice the gifts you give us. Are kind enough to give us, said Anthea in a whisper. Are kind enough to give us, I mean, said Robert. The fairy swelled himself out a bit, let his breath go, and said, I've done that for you. It was quite easy. People don't notice things much anyway. What's the next wish? We want, said Robert slowly, to be rich beyond the dreams of something or other. Avarice, said Jane. So it is, said the fairy unexpectedly. But it won't do you much good, that's one comfort, it muttered to itself. Come, I can't go beyond dreams, you know. How much do you want? And will you have it in gold or notes? Gold, please, and millions of it. This gravel pit full be enough, said the fairy in an offhand manner. Oh yes. Then get out before I begin, or you'll be buried alive in it. It made its skinny arms so long, and waved them so frighteningly, that the children ran as hard as they could towards the road by which carts used to come to the gravel pits. Only Anthea had presence of mind enough to shout a timid, "Good morning. I hope your whisker will be better tomorrow," as she ran. On the road, they turned and looked back, and they had to shut their eyes and open them very slowly, a little bit at a time, because the sight was too dazzling for their eyes to be able to bear it. It was something like trying to look at the sun at high noon on Midsummer Day, for the whole of the sandpit was full, right up to the very top, with new shining gold pieces, and all the little sand martins' little front doors were covered out of sight. Where the road for the carts wound into the gravel pit, the gold lay in heaps like stones lie by the roadside, and a great bank of shining gold shelved down from where it lay flat and smooth between the tall sides of the gravel pit. And all the gleaming heap was minted gold, and on the sides and edges of these countless coins the midday sun shone and sparkled and glowed and gleamed till the quarry looked like the mouth of a smelting furnace, or one of the fairy halls that you see sometimes in the sky at sunset. The children stood with their mouths open, and no one said a word. At last, Robert stopped and picked up one of the loose coins from the edge of the heap by the cart road and looked at it. He looked on both sides. Then he said in a low voice, quite different to his own, "It's not sovereigns." "It's gold, anyway," said Cyril. And now they all began to talk at once. They all picked up the golden treasure by handfuls and let it run through their fingers like water, and the chink it made as it fell was wonderful music. At first, they quite forgot to think of spending the money. It was so nice to play with. Jane sat down between two heaps of gold, and Robert began to bury her, as you bury your father in sand when you are at the seaside, and he has gone to sleep on the beach with his newspaper over his face. But Jane was not half buried before she cried out, "Oh, stop, it's too heavy. It hurts." Robert said bosh, and went on. "Let me out, I tell you," cried Jane, and was taken out, very white and trembling a little. "You've no idea what it's like," said she. "It's like stones on you, or like chains." "Look here," Cyril said. "If this is to do us any good, it's no good our staying gasping at it like this. Let's fill our pockets and go and buy things. Don't you forget, it won't last after sunset. I wish we'd asked the Samyad why things don't turn to stone. Perhaps this will. I'll tell you what, there's a pony and cart in the village. Do you want to buy that?" asked Jane. "No, silly, we'll hire it. And then we'll go to Rochester and buy heaps and heaps of things. Look here, let's each take as much as we can carry. But it's not sovereigns. They've got a man's head on one side and a thing like the ace of spades on the other. Fill your pockets with it, I tell you, and come along. You can jaw as we go, if you must jaw." Cyril sat down and began to fill his pockets. "You made fun of me for getting father to have 9 pockets in my Norfolks," said he. "But now you see. They did." For when Cyril had filled his 9 pockets, and his handkerchief, and the space between himself and his shirt front with the gold coins, he had to stand up. But he staggered, and had to sit down again in a hurry. "Throw out some of the cargo," said Robert. "You'll sink the ship, old chap. That comes of 9 pockets." And Cyril had to. Then they set off to walk to the village. It was more than a mile, and the road was very dusty indeed, and the sun seemed to get hotter and hotter, and the gold in their pockets got heavier and heavier. It was Jane who said, "I don't see how we're to spend it all. There must be thousands of pounds among the lot of us. I'm going to leave some of mine behind this stump in the hedge, and directly we get to the village, we'll buy some biscuits. I know it's long past dinner time." She took out a handful or two of gold and hid it in the hollows of an old hornbeam. "How round and yellow they are," she said. "Don't you wish they were gingerbread nuts and we were going to eat them?" "Well, they're not, and we're not," said Cyril. "Come on." But they came on heavily and wearily. Before they reached the village, more than one stump in the hedge concealed its little hoard of hidden treasure. Yet they reached the village with about 1,200 guineas in their pockets. But in spite of this inside wealth, they looked quite ordinary outside, and no one would have thought they could have more than a half-crown each at the outside. The haze of heat, the blue of the wood smoke, made a sort of dim misty cloud over the red roofs of the village. The four sat down heavily on the first bench. They came to it, happened to be outside the Blue Boar Inn. It was decided that Cyril should go into the Blue Boar and ask for ginger beer, because, as Anthea said, it is not wrong for men to go into public houses, only for children. And Cyril is nearer to being a man than us, because he is the eldest. So he went. The others sat in the sun and waited. "Oh, hats, how hot it is," said Robert. "Dogs put their tongues out when they're hot. I wonder if it would cool us at all to put out ours." "We might try," Jane said, and they all put their tongues out as far as ever they could go, so that it quite stretched their throats, but it only seemed to make them thirstier than ever, besides annoying everyone who went by. So they took their tongues in again, just as Cyril came back with the ginger beer. "I had to pay for it out of my own 2 and 7 pence, though, that I was going to buy rabbits with," he said. "They wouldn't change the gold. And when I pulled out a handful, the man just laughed and said it was card counters. And I got some sponge cakes, too, out of a glass jar on the bar counter, and some biscuits with caraways in. The sponge cakes were both soft and dry, and the biscuits were dry too, and yet soft, which biscuits ought not to be. But the ginger beer made up for everything. It's my turn now to try to buy something with the money," Anthea said. "I'm next eldest. Where is the pony cart kept?" It was at the Checkers, and Anthea went in the back way to the yard, because they all knew that little girls ought not to go into the bars of public houses. She came out, as she herself said, pleased but not proud. "He'll be ready in a brace of shakes, he says," she remarked. "And he's to have 1 sovereign, or whatever it is, to drive us in to Rochester and back, besides waiting there till we've got everything we want." "I think I managed very well. You think yourself jolly clever, I dare say," said Cyril moodily. "How did you do it?" "I wasn't jolly clever enough to go taking handfuls of money out of my pocket, to make it seem cheap anyway," she retorted. "I just found a young man doing something to a horse's leg with a sponge and a pail, and I held out 1 sovereign, and I said, 'Do you know what this is?' He said, 'No,' and he'd call his father. And the old man came, and he said it was a spade guinea, and he said was it my own to do as I liked with, and I said yes. And I asked about the pony cart, and I said he could have the guinea if he'd drive us in to Rochester. And his name is S. Crispin. And he said, right-o. It was a new sensation to be driven in a smart pony trap along pretty country roads. It was very pleasant too, which is not always the case with new sensations. Quite apart from the beautiful plans of spending the money which each child made as they went along, silently of course, and quite to itself, for they felt it would never have done to let the old innkeeper hear them talk in the affluent sort of way they were thinking. The old man put them down by the bridge at their request. If you were going to buy a carriage and horses, where would you go? Asked Cyril, as if he were only asking for the sake of something to say. Billy Peacemarsh, at the Saracen's Head, said the old man promptly, though all forbid I should recommend any man where it's a question of horses, no more than I'd take anybody else's recommending if I was a-buying one. But if your pa's thinking of a turnout of any sort, there ain't a straighter man in Rochester, nor a civiller spoken than Billy, though I says it. Thank you, said Cyril. The Saracen's Head. And now the children began to see one of the laws of nature turn upside down and stand on its head like an acrobat. Any grown-up persons would tell you that money is hard to get and easy to spend. But the fairy money had been easy to get, and spending it was not only hard, it was almost impossible. The tradespeople of Rochester seemed to shrink to tradesperson. From the glittering fairy gold, fur and money, they called it, for the most part. To begin with Anthea, who had had the misfortune to sit on her hat earlier in the day, wished to buy another. She chose a very beautiful one, trimmed with pink roses and the blue breasts of peacocks. It was marked in the window, Paris model, 3 guineas. I'm glad, she said, because if it says guineas, it means guineas and not sovereigns, which we haven't got. But when she took 3 of the spade guineas in her hand, which was by this time rather dirty owing to her not having put on gloves before going to the gravel pit, the black silk young lady in the shop looked very hard at her, and went and whispered something to an older and uglier lady, also in black silk, and then they gave her back the money, and said it was not current coin. It's good money, said Anthea, and it's my own. I dare say, said the lady, but it's not the kind of money that's fashionable now, and we don't care about taking it. I believe they think we've stolen it, said Anthea, rejoining the others in the street. If we had gloves, they wouldn't think we were so dishonest. It's my hands being so dirty fills their minds with doubts. So they chose a humble shop, and the girls bought cotton gloves, the kind at 6 3 farthings. But when they offered a guinea, the woman looked at it through her spectacles and said she had no change, so the gloves had to be paid for out of Cyril's 2 7 that he meant to buy rabbits with, and so had the green imitation crocodile skin purse at 9 halfpenny, which had been bought at the same time. They tried several more shops, the kinds where you buy toys and scent, and silk handkerchiefs and books, and fancy boxes of stationery, and photographs of objects of interest in the vicinity. But nobody cared to change a guinea that day in Rochester. And as they went from shop to shop, they got dirtier and dirtier, hair got more and more untidy, and Jane slipped and fell down on a part of the road where a water cart had just gone by. Also, they got very hungry, but they found no one would give them anything to eat for their guineas. After trying 2 pasture cooks in vain, they became so hungry, perhaps from the smell of the cake in the shops, as Cyril suggested, that they formed a plan of campaign in whispers and carried it out in desperation. They marched into a 3rd pasture cook's Biel, his name was, and before the people behind the counter could interfere, each child had seized 3 new penny buns, clapped the 3 together between its dirty hands, and taken a big bite out of the triple sandwich. Then they stood at bay, with the 12 buns in their hands and their mouths very full indeed. The shocked pasture cook bounded round the corner. "Here," said Cyril, speaking as distinctly as he could, and holding out the guinea he got ready before entering the shop. "Pay yourself out of that." Mr. Beale snatched the coin, bit it, and put it in his pocket. "Off you go," he said, brief and stern like the man in the song. "But the change," said Anthea, who had a saving mind. "Chain," said the man. "I'll change you. Out you goes. And you may think yourselves lucky I don't send for the police to find out where you got it." In the castle gardens, the millionaires finished the buns, and though the currenty softness of these were delicious, and acted like a charm in raising the spirits of the party, yet even the stoutest heart quailed at the thought of venturing to sound Mr. Billy Peasemarsh at the Saracen's Head on the subject of a horse and carriage. The boys would have given up the idea, but Jane was always a hopeful child, and Anthea generally an obstinate one, and their earnestness prevailed. The whole party, by this time indescribably dirty, therefore betook itself to the Saracen's Head, the yard method of attack having been successful at the Checkers, was tried again here. Mr. Peasemarsh was in the yard, and Robert opened the business in these terms: "They tell me you have a lot of horses and carriages to sell." It had been agreed that Robert should be spokesman, because in books it is always the gentlemen who buy horses, and not ladies, and Cyril had had his go at the Blue Boar. "They tell you true, young man," said Mr. Peasemarsh. He was a long, lean man, with very blue eyes and a tight mouth and narrow lips. "We should like to buy some, please," said Robert politely. "I dare say you would. Will you show us a few, please, to choose from? Who are you a kitten of?" inquired Mr. Billy Peasemarsh. "Was you sent here of a message?" "I tell you," said Robert, "we want to buy some horses and carriages, and a man told us you were straight and civil-spoken, but I shouldn't wonder if he was mistaken." "Upon my sacred," said Mr. Peasemarsh, "shall I trot the whole stable out for your honour's worship to see? Or shall I send round to the bishop's to see if he's a nag or 2 to dispose of?" "Please do," said Robert. "If it's not too much trouble, it would be very kind of you." Mr. Peasemarsh put his hands in his pockets and laughed, and they did not like the way he did it. Then he shouted Willem. A stooping ostler appeared in a stable door. "Here, Willem, come and look at this 'ere young dook. Wants to buy the whole stud, lock, stock, and barrel, and ain't got 2pence in his pocket to bless hisself with, I'll go bail. Willem's eyes followed his master's pointing thumb with contemptuous interest. "Do E, for sure," he said, but Robert spoke, though both the girls were now pulling at his jacket and begging him to come along. He spoke, and he was very angry, he said. "I'm not a young duke, and I never pretended to be. And as for tuppence, what do you call this?" And before the others could stop him, he had pulled out 2 fat handfuls of shining guineas and held them out for Mr. Peasemarsh to look at. He did look. He snatched one up in his finger and thumb. He bit it, and Jane expected him to say, "The best horse in my stables is at your service." But the others knew better. Still, it was a blow, even to the most desponding, when he said shortly, "Willem, shut the yard doors," and Willem grinned and went to shut them. "Good afternoon," said Robert hastily. "We shan't buy any of your horses now, whatever you say, and I hope it'll be a lesson to you." He had seen a little side gate open, and was moving towards it as he spoke, but Billy Peasemarsh put himself in the way. "Not so fast, you young offscouring," he said. "Willem, fetch the police." Willem went. The children stood huddled together like frightened sheep, and Mr. Peasemarsh spoke to them till the police arrived. He said many things. Among other things he said, "Nice lot you are, aren't you, coming tempting honest men with your guineas?" "They are our guineas," said Cyril boldly. "Oh, of course we don't know all about that. No more we don't. Oh no, course not." And dragging little Gels into it too. "I'll let the Gels go if you'll come along to the police quiet." "We won't be let go," said Jane heroically. "Not without the boys. It's our money just as much as theirs, you wicked old man." "Where'd you get it then?" said the man, softening slightly, which was not at all what the boys expected when Jane began to call names. Jane cast a silent glance of agony at the others. "Lost your tongue? Got it fast enough when it's for calling names with... Come, speak up. Where'd you get it?" "Out of the gravel pit," said truthful Jane. "Next article," said the man. "I tell you we did," Jane said. "There's a fairy there, all over brown fur with ears like a bat's and eyes like a snail's. And he gives you a wish a day, and they all come true." "Touched in the head, said the man in a low voice. "All the more shame to you boys dragging the poor afflicted child into your sinful burglaries." "She's not mad, it's true," said Anthea. "There is a fairy. If I ever see him again, I'll wish for something for you. At least, I would if vengeance wasn't wicked, so there." "Lor' lum," said Billy Peasemarsh, "if there ain't another on 'em." And now Willem came back with a spiteful grin on his face, and at his back a policeman, with whom Mr. Peasemarsh spoke long in a hoarse, earnest whisper. "I dare say you're right," said the policeman at last. "Anyway, I'll take him up on a charge of unlawful possession, pending inquiries, and the magistrate will deal with the case. Send the afflicted ones to a home, as likely as not, and the boys to a reformatory. Now then, come along, youngsters. No use making a fuss. You bring the Gels along, Mr. Peasemarsh, sir, and I'll shepherd the boys." Speechless with rage and horror, the 4 children were driven along the streets of Rochester. Tears of anger and shame blinded them, so that when Robert ran right into a passerby, he did not recognize her, till a well-known voice said, "Well, if ever I did. Oh, Master Robert, whatever have you been a-doing of now?" And another voice, quite as well known, said, panting, want go on panty. They had run into Martha and the baby. Martha behaved admirably. She refused to believe a word of the policeman's story, or of Mr. Peasemarsh's either, even when they made Robert turn out his pockets in an archway and show the guineas. "I don't see nothing," she said. "You've gone out of your senses, you two. There ain't any gold there, only the poor child's hands, all over crock and dirt, and like the very chimbley. Oh, that I should ever see the day." And the children thought this very noble of Martha, even if rather wicked, till they remembered how the fairy had promised that the servants should never notice any of the fairy gifts. So, of course, Martha couldn't see the gold, and so was only speaking the truth, and that was quite right, of course, but not extra noble. It was getting dusk when they reached the police station. The policeman told his tale to an inspector, who sat in a large bare room with a thing like a clumsy nursery fender at one end to put prisoners in. Robert wondered whether it was a cell or a dock. "Produce the coins, officer," said the inspector. "Turn out your pockets," said the constable. Cyril desperately plunged his hands in his pockets, stood still a moment, and then began to laugh an odd sort of laugh that hurt, and that felt much more like crying. His pockets were empty. So were the pockets of the others, for of course at sunset all the fairy gold had vanished away. "Turn out your pockets and stop that noise," said the inspector. Cyril turned out his pockets, every one of the 9 which enriched his Norfolk suit, and every pocket was empty. "Well," said the inspector, "I don't know how they done it, artful little beggars. They walked in front of me the whole way, so as for me to keep my eye on them, and not to attract a crowd and obstruct the traffic. It's very remarkable," said the inspector, frowning. "If you've quite done a browbeating of the innocent children," said Martha, "I'll hire a private carriage, and we'll drive home to their papa's mansion. You'll hear about this again, young man. I told you they hadn't got any gold when you were pretending to see it in their poor helpless hands. It's early in the day for a constable on duty not to be able to trust his own eyes. As to the other one, the less said the better. He keeps the Saracen's head, and he knows best what his liquor's like. Take them away, for goodness sake," said the inspector crossly. But as they left the police station, he said, "Now then," to the policeman and Mr. Peasemarsh, and he said it 20 times as crossly as he had spoken to Martha. Martha was as good as her word. She took them home in a very grand carriage, because the carrier's cart was gone, and though she had stood by them so nobly with the police, she was so angry with them as soon as they were alone for trapsing into Rochester by themselves, that none of them dared to mention the old man with the pony cart from the village, who was waiting for them in Rochester. And so, after one day of boundless wealth, the children found themselves sent to bed in deep disgrace, and only enriched by 2 pairs of cotton gloves, dirty inside because of the state of the hands they had been put on to cover, an imitation crocodile skin purse, and 12 penny buns long since digested. The thing that troubled them most was the fear that the old gentleman's guinea might have disappeared at sunset with all the rest. So they went down to the village next day to to apologize for not meeting him in Rochester, and to see. They found him very friendly. The guinea had not disappeared, and he had bored a hole in it and hung it on his watch chain. As for the guinea the baker took, the children felt they could not care whether it had vanished or not, which was not perhaps very honest, but on the other hand was not wholly unnatural. But afterwards this preyed on Anthea's mind, and at last she secretly sent 12 stamps by post to Mr. Beale, baker, Rochester. Inside she wrote, to pay for the buns. I hope the guinea did disappear, for that pasture cook was really not at all a nice man. And besides, penny buns are 7 for 6 in all really respectable shops.